It is a great pleasure to be here. My name is Pete Peterson, and I am Dean of Pepperdine's Graduate School of Public Policy, one of America's only conservative graduate schools teaching the founding principles, free markets, and the importance of religious liberty. And so I've got a lot of data to go through, and so just so you know, if you're at all interested in getting this slide deck, I'm happy to send it over to you, Karen, and you can see that. It is a great pleasure to be here as one of 5 Republicans who lives in Santa Monica. I always love to get together with so many conservatives. They're the other 3. But this is the second gathering like this in an unexpected place. On Thursday, actually, we hosted Dr. Victor Davis Hanson in downtown Los Angeles to give our 2019 Spring Distinguished Dean's Lecture. And as I said there, and we were well oversubscribed, we had well over 200 people in downtown Los Angeles for that. I think even Dr. Hanson was a little bit surprised to see that many conservatives interested in his message around his current best-selling book, The Case for Trump, but it was really a delightful evening spent. If there's a theme to my remarks, it is actually worse than you think in higher education, but we should be more hopeful than we currently believe. One of the reasons that I became accustomed with this issue was, as dean of a graduate policy school, I speak a lot on undergraduate campuses recruiting students to our policy school. And over time, I began to understand a very simple fact, which in looking at this audience, I hope this is one takeaway from my presentation. This isn't your own undergraduate experience. It's not your younger brothers or sisters. When I speak on undergraduate campuses, I begin with 3 questions. Number 1, has anyone in this room been dismissed or belittled by a professor for taking a conservative perspective in a classroom discussion? And 3/4 of the hands go up. Then I ask them, how many of you have been downgraded on a test or written assignment for taking a conservative perspective on a particular question on a test or written assignment? About half of the hands go up. Then I ask them, how many of you have changed your major from a political science or social science major to one in the natural sciences or business, a non-political major, just because you couldn't take it anymore? And about 1/4 of the hands go up. Now, this is a major problem. For as Dr. Wood has mentioned and has been mentioned before, higher education is an important civic institution in the United States. But unless we first understand how bad it is for students, now I'm not talking about what happens to speakers, I'm talking about now what is happening inside the classroom. Unless we really grasp that, and then also find those points of connections with coalitions that are being created. Coalitions, by the way, that are being built across the left-right divide. People on the left who are standing up to say, this pendulum has swung too far. We need to stand up and defend conservative perspectives in higher education. We need to be building those bridges as well, okay? So first, what I want to do is talk about why this is happening now, then talk a little bit about why it's worse than you think or may have thought, and then finally conclude with some steps that we can take. We ready? Okay. I don't know if this is working. Okay. Why is this happening now? Well, it's happening now because people are getting much more aware of how bad it is on campus. The speaker events, this obviously was Hayden Williams. I offered Hayden Williams, we were one of the CPAC hosts this past year. I offered Hayden Williams a scholarship to come to the School of Public Policy and had a chance to speak with him afterwards, and he is considering that. Suffice it to say, what these videos have done have really awakened people's attentions across the political divide that this is no longer just the 60s free speech movement. Right? That what is happening now is actually the opposite. That those that have pushed for free speech in the 1960s have now flipped the tables and are now squelching free speech on campus. Second, What we are witnessing now is a generational change in who is teaching our kids in undergraduate. So now I want to look specifically at faculty. This is an important research study done by the Data for a Higher Education Research Institute. It's actually an institute based at UCLA. It's featured in the book by John Shields and Josh Dunn called Passing on the Right. I would recommend this book to anyone. It is the most comprehensive study of what it's like to be a conservative faculty member in a college or university. They interviewed 150 faculty members across the country, and not a single name was used in the book. That's how bad it is for conservative faculty members. They began their interviews at the School of Public Policy with our conservative faculty. So what you see there is this trend line beginning in the late 80s, which is when I went to undergraduate school, and you see there at the beginning, you see a pretty even match between those faculty members who would describe themselves as moderate versus liberal. You see the trend line for far-right or conservative faculty members. This is self-identification, stays pretty consistent over the decades. But what you see between moderates and those who are far-left or liberal, you see a dramatic increase in those who describe themselves as far-left as liberal, and that seems to be at the expense of the moderates. What's happening there? What's happening there is that those who came of age during the GI Bill, those who had come into academia after World War II and the Korean War, were generally what I would call New Deal liberals. There were people who taught me when I went to George Washington University in the late 80s. There were people who I knew they were progressive, but I never felt for a second as a student that I ever had to squelch my opinion if it was unlike theirs. I never felt for a second that if I wrote something from a conservative perspective, even though I knew my professor was a progressive, that I would ever be downgraded for it. What we're seeing now generationally is the generation of faculty who came of age during the 60s and 70s, got their PhDs during that period. They are now teaching our kids, and not just that, they are running these departments of social science and the political sciences. Next slide. Now, not only is that happening in faculties, what we're seeing now is the growth of what I call the diversity industrial complex. And this is the growth in administration of administrators who are pushing a diversity agenda, and one that is almost exclusively from the left. This is a great article from my friend Sam Abrams, who's done a lot of research on this. This was featured in the New York Times, of all places, just a few months ago. He surveyed 900 college administrators regarding their points of view. You see the data points there. 71% of administrators viewed themselves as liberal or very liberal. Only 6% viewed themselves as conservative. That's a 12-to-1 ratio. Students that they interviewed were less than 2-to-1 progressive to conservative. And I love this line that Sam writes at the end. It appears that a fairly liberal student body is being taught by a very liberal professoriate and socialized by an incredibly liberal group of administrators. So this is why this is happening now, this generational shift in our faculties as well as administrators. Next slide. So there's been an increasing amount of research done, and some of it done by our friends at the National Association of Scholars. This was a study done in 2017 matching tenure-track faculty along with their party registration. Now, I know party registration isn't always indicative of what happens inside the classroom, but it's at least a signal, right? So this was a study of 7,200 tenure-track faculty in America's top 50 U.S. News and World Report schools. Top 50 News and World Report schools across the majors of economics, history, journalism, law, and psychology. You see the results there. 3,600 registered Democrats, only 314 registered Republicans. When they went to the school level, here were some of the splits. At Brown, you had 60 Democrats to 1 Republican in those faculties. Boston University, 40-to-1. Hopkins, 35-to-1. More locally, UC Davis, 26-to-1. USC, 26-to-1. UCLA, 8.8-to-1. And little old Pepperdine, 1.2-to-1. Now, I know what you're saying. Pepperdine's that right-wing school over there overlooking the Pacific, but really what we are is just balanced. But when you're balanced as a faculty, that's seen as right-wing when you're looking at some of these other data points. Now, our friends at the National Association of Scholars did another report just last year in which they looked at the top 60 U.S. News and World Report liberal arts colleges across the country, 8,600 tenure-track faculty at these schools, and in those 66 liberal arts colleges, 39% of them, they could not find a single registered Republican teaching there. Now, that very kind of squelch chart on the left is when they went by particular disciplines. And what they found was when you looked at the STEM fields, engineering, physics, you looked at some of the other natural sciences, that's where you saw the greatest balance between conservatives and liberals. Why is that? Because we care about the facts, right? But when you got into some of these other political science majors, when you look at, say, religion, 70 Democrats to 1 Republican. Anthropology, they couldn't find a single Republican teaching in an anthropology program. Communications, over 100 faculty members, they could not find a single Republican teaching in a communications program. Why is that important? Because these are the future people who are running our journalism programs around the country. I see Now let's look at a particular school. This is Harvard. And to their great credit, the Harvard Crimson did a study not only of their faculty, but also of their students. This was the vote of Harvard faculty in the last election. And you see there 73% voted for Hillary, 2% voted for Trump. I'm going to go through these. So there's a couple things. What this is creating for our students now is what I call the eggshell culture. And it was described so well by a young lady by the name of Kim Barrett, who is a graduating senior from Smith College, 2018. She wrote this great piece in her local student newspaper called The Sophian, and this is what she wrote about her 4 years. This is just as she's graduating, her 4 years at a great liberal arts school, Smith College. During my first days at Smith, I witnessed countless conversations that consisted of one person telling another person that their opinion was wrong. The word offensive was almost always included in the reasoning. Within a few short weeks, members of my freshman class had quickly assimilated into this new way of non-thinking. They could soon detect a politically incorrect view and call the person out on their mistake. I began to voice my opinion less and less, often to avoid being berated and judged by a community that claims to represent the free expression of ideas. I learned, along with every other student, to walk on eggshells for fear that I may say something offensive. That is the social norm here. Folks, what we have today in our undergraduate schools is an eggshell environment where students don't feel that they can express themselves. What this produces is, on one side, progressive students who have never heard a conservative point of view until they come to, of course, Pepperdine Graduate School of Public Policy. I get a chance to see them all the time. But we also have conservative students who feel that they have to constantly squelch and watch what they say. These are not self-governing citizens that we're preparing. These are people who are walking on eggshells. Now, I see that I'm running late on time, so I just wanted to highlight a couple things. One, if you don't know about the Heterodox Academy, you need to know. This was started in 2015 by a self-described progressive social psychology professor named Jonathan Haidt at NYU. It started with just about a dozen professors who had signed a pledge to support what they're calling viewpoint diversity in the teaching and hiring in their undergraduate institutions. It started with a dozen professors. It is now up over 2,000. Now, these are not just conservative professors, these are also progressives as well, who have recognized again that the pendulum has swung too far. This is the website. If you go to their resources tab, you can actually search by undergraduate institution what specific professors have signed the pledge to support viewpoint diversity. If you have a kid or a grandkid, or if you're a student out there in the back who doesn't believe you have anyone that you can speak to as a faculty member, go to this website, look at the resources, and do a search by college. You might be amazed at how many people in the schools that you're connected with are actually supporting viewpoint diversity. A couple other things. So support Heterodox Academy faculty members at your alma mater. I'll also say, stop giving as an alum to your undergraduate institution unless and until you know that senior administration is supporting viewpoint diversity, not only for the speakers that come, not just for the speakers who come. That is too easy. Who really cares if we get 2 or 3 conservative speakers come to a campus? This is about the ability to express opinions inside the classroom and the hiring of conservative faculty members. I want to close with this. This talks about what you can do. Amazing story. Pomona College last year, because they were pressured by alums and donors, were very concerned about the fact that conservative students were having to squelch their opinions. The president of Pomona College commissioned the Gallup Survey organization to do this survey of their faculty and students. Here's what they found, and this is all online, by the way. If you just Google Pomona College and viewpoint diversity, this will be the first hit. So you see here, this is student political ideology. Only 3% of students are conservative at Pomona College. You see on the faculty, only 4%. Here's the real problem with that. This is another question in the survey. More important for colleges to prohibit certain types of expression. If you're a liberal student or very liberal, 75% support squelching of free speech. If you're very conservative, only 20%. More important for colleges to allow all types of speech. Very liberal, only 25% support. Very conservative or moderate, 80% support. What we're seeing in these schools is that really what we see in all organizations that go into a monoculture. In every kind of monoculture, you find a growing squelching of a diversity of opinions. So if you happen to be very engaged as an alum of your undergraduate institution, send them the link to the Pomona College survey. It took a lot of courage for President Starr of Pomona College to not only do this survey, but actually post it up online that's Google searchable, because this does not make Pomona look very good. So demand this kind of survey. We need to support our conservative students and our conservative faculty members. And I'm confident that we should be hopeful about a change in our cultures across the colleges and universities of America. Thank you.